Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Spiritual Sojourn. And hi, Tom.
Hello, Laurie.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing so well. It's good to see you. It's good to be with you to do this.
It's good to be with you as well. I understand you've had some inspiration this week, so you want to share a little bit about that?
I did. I had one of those moments where you get some clarity on something that would be an interesting topic. And it's in light of several friends that I had this week whose pets have crossed over, and also some people's relatives that have crossed over. And the question that came to me is some of those people were in great suffering. And I just wonder if they are stuck in their body for all that time when they're suffering, or do they get to take a break out of there? What happens to them? Do you know about that, or can we ask about that?
Sure. Let me just start with um, when I worked in hospice care, it always seemed to me that folks, especially toward the end, the final few days or so, kind of were one foot here, one foot there, so to speak.
Mhm.
Seemed like they were kind of their soul was moving in and out of the physical, the 3D world into the soul world and back and forth. So that was my experience just as in working with hospice. But let me see what the guides have to share with us. That is, in fact, a very accurate description of what is happening as death nears for the physical body. As the mind and ego and the physical body begin to shut down, the soul is then free to move into and out of the physical reality. So, yes, many times the soul will spend time in the soul world or simply out of the physical body
Mhm.
in order to observe and to reduce that feeling of pain and panic.
Mhm.
However, that is to say, if that is part of the soul's path, for some, it is imperative that the soul remains through the entire dying process and then is released at the very end as the body stops, as the last breath is exhaled. This is part of that soul's experience of what that means to die, to have that experience of non existence, if you will. Even though the soul knows once it is released from the physical body, then it knows that it is eternal and will move on in their crossing. It's important to remember that humans exist in two ways and operate in two separate ways. One is the physical body that moves around, that takes the soul places, and has the mind and ego and the many emotions that come with that. Soul is an eternal being that is temporarily living in this vehicle, if you will, and has other experiences besides being in the physical body. Most souls, however, choose to come to Earth and be human for this very physical experience. And at times that includes the death experience.
Okay. Mhm.
We would also point out that your pets also have similar experiences, for they are also souls that are in a physical body and also transition much the same way. Although we would say for them, the soul probably leaves all of the time prior to the last breath taken. For at that point, the soul has that ability to leave, for it will serve no purpose, generally speaking, for it to remain within the physical body of a pet. Although there are those who choose to do so as a way of honoring the life that they have just led.
Wow.
For animals in the wild, they leave So for animals in the wild, those who are killed suddenly, say they were hunted or were prey and were taken down, their soul leaves immediately. If they have been injured and are dying or dying from some other reason, their soul may linger a bit longer, but will also make that transition as the body continues to stop working. That's interesting. I had not thought about that for the animals, especially.
Yes.
Yeah.
So let me ask them again. Let's say your beloved pet dog runs out into the street, gets hit by a car, goes under the tire of the car. It's going to be a very painful experience for that dog. At what point might the dog leave their body, and how much of that experience would they actually get, assuming they didn't want to stay in their body for that whole time?
They would leave at impact, is what I hear.
Okay.
Mm.
Wow. So I think we've all um, been around someone who was very sick and then passed. Um, I always wonder about them as well. So let's say, and Laurie, you've been around a lot of patients in hospice, so we
Mhm.
can draw from your experience as well. Let's say you have an unfortunate cancer patient who really just doesn't have a chance, and they've been given, let's say, 6 weeks. How much of that time during that 6 weeks are they in their body?
So again, the guides are stepping in. As we have said, that will in some ways depend upon the soul contract, the soul decisions, and what it wants to experience prior to physical death. Much of that time, the soul will remain fully embodied within the vessel, having these experiences, communicating with loved ones, both in the 3D physical world here, as well as those who have already crossed over. For in fact, it is preparing to leave the body. As it gets a bit closer, you may notice that the soul will, from time to time, seem to leave, to transition. Those may be those times in part when the individual is heavily sedated or when they are in a comatose state. The soul can step out. Does not mean it crosses over at that point, but it can leave that body, stay close by, communicate with guides, angels, other beings of light as it prepares for the transition and as the human body continues to shut down. So it's very fluid in those moments. There are many times when you are sitting with someone who is ready to make the transition, the body has stopped working, that you will see the actual soul itself, the light of that being, rise up and be moved toward source, be moved out of the body and out of the third dimension. The thing that came up for me as they were saying that, as I actually watched that happen, even before I ever worked in hospice, I saw that I had that experience with an aunt of mine who was dying, and we were sitting with her in the hospital, and she was slowly stopping. You could see her breathing was stopping and starting again. And at the moment she stopped breathing, I noticed right in her heart area, this beautiful white light appeared just above her body, and these other two lights on either side of that white light appeared simultaneously, and I watched them just go up through the ceiling. And it was like, wow. And I've never experienced that again,
Wow.
but it was the most incredible moment to be witness to that. That was an incredible experience.
So was there anyone in the room with you to that was
My
I'm
mother
not
was
I'm sorry, go ahead.
My mother was sitting there with me. She did not see that
Okay.
because I asked her, and she said she did not see that happen.
I can see where you might see that, but not necessarily everyone.
But I think we all can. I think partly it's being with someone at that moment they take their last breath and then being open to that experience. And I think I was just opening up to my abilities to channel. And so I think it allowed me to be able to see that because I was working on being open.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about spirit. I'm going to make up my own terms here because that's how I roll. Um, let's call it spiritual morphine. Okay. So when someone's passing, um, they give them a lot of morphine, especially when they are, in hospice and they've
Mhm.
been given a do not resuscitate. At some point in there, they don't get food, water, and it's just a matter of how much time. If they're in their body, that's the point at which there would be the most suffering. Is there such a thing as spiritual morphine so that they can experience that but not have to endure every bit of that pain?
It is really the soul's choice. And again, they may be able to make the choice if it is part of that contract for that lifetime, they will be able to step free and not experience that suffering.
Okay.
If, however, part of that agreement was to have this experience, then they will stay fully present through all of it. And they may, in fact, move back and forth, experience a little, and then step out again, for it may serve them as they transition and then make other choices for the next lifetime. It all depends on the soul contract and agreement and what the soul was here to experience from beginning to end of their life as a physical being. There certainly comes a point when the physical body is declining and slowly shutting down system by system. There is no need for food or water. The body does not feel the need for it. It is a part of that natural process of the physical death that occurs. And soul, of course, has no need for either of those.
Right. I think probably the most common fear among humans is fear of death. And so I don't think enlightened people feel like they will be, that once they have passed and crossed over, that there will be anything to be afraid. But that process that we're describing could be fearful for many. So, is there a way that at this point in your life, you can reduce that fear by manifesting a smoother crossover?
So let me just kind of speak to that based on my experiences in hospice care, um, particularly. Uh, It's always interesting to me how people die. And the fear I think we feel, or that I can touch into for myself, it's more that mind ego fear that I won't exist anymore because mind and ego can't conceive of a time when they're not here and in their way of thinking in charge and so in control. So the fear to me comes from that mind and ego piece that says, that's never going to happen. We're here forever. My soul knows that I'm an eternal being, that this body will eventually stop. And me, that soul me, that true me, if you will, is going to continue
Mhm.
and will transition to something else. The other thing I think that for me, and as I have observed it with others and talking with them, is that it's the fear of the unknown. Humans have this sort of innate fear of anything that we don't understand and that we don't know. And so we're always searching for knowing everything. And it makes us afraid when there's something we can't know. And unless you've had a near-death experience, you have no way of knowing what it will be like when you finally die. And so that's the fear, because once the body stops, the soul leaves. Of course, there's no fear because the soul is going home, basically,
Mhm.
into that eternal life again. So that, to me, fear comes from just the mind and ego not accepting that it's going to end at some point. I want to die well, and I have that in my head that yes, I'm going to have this beautiful, peaceful death, and I will just make that transition beautifully. My soul will leave, and that'll be it, and I'll move on to whatever's next. What I believe might happen is that I will go kicking and screaming like many folks do, and resisting it because I don't want to go, or because I'm afraid of what's unknown. I'm hoping not, but we never know. I once had a priest, and he was dying very close to death and was not ready at all, and literally went kicking and screaming and wanted 911 called when he was almost to that moment of death. And I was sort of confused by that and thinking, but he's a priest. Isn't he like excited to be released now from this body and can go back and be with Jesus and God? And one of the folks I worked with, one of our bereavement counselors who happened to also be a nun, looked at me and said, "But Laurie, he's also a human being." And a light went on. It's like, oh, yes, of course he is. Didn't mean he didn't have any faith anymore, but the human part of him was not ready for that transition. And
Mhm.
so I don't know if any of us can really know how we'll take it when we're ready to go. I'm hoping that my my desire would be that I could sit down in a deep meditation like those wonderful yogis or whoever can do and just simply leave my body. I don't think that will happen.
No,
No.
it'd be very fortunate for that to happen, but
Yeah.
I'm right there with you. I,
Right.
I'd like to throw a big party, but I don't think that's going to happen either.
Well, you could arrange it so that as you're on your deathbed, in a sense, have all your friends come and be there and play music, have a big party, basically toast you out, and you could definitely do that.
I'll work on that. And maybe my last words will be, and if I'm wrong, may God strike me dead. And then,
That would be perfect if that could happen.
okay.
I also think maybe when we get to the other side, we could have a big party over there.
That's what I understand is they're all having a good time over there all the time. So
Right,
if nothing else, that should be something to look forward to, not to be feared.
right. And again, it comes back to that distinguishing between our true self soul, who's an eternal being who knows that, and mind ego, who thinks they're always in charge and are never going to die.
Mhm.
Right.
Yep.
And that's where the fear comes from. Yeah.
Fascinating
It's
topic. Now there are a lot of different more mechanical parts of this process that we're not going to cover, and I would encourage people to visit Psychic Cash Peters on YouTube, and he has an entire channel called Soul Crossing devoted to this process at a more detailed level and the things that we experience to shed our ego and to experience some of our karma as we cross over. So I'll put a link to that in the notes. And
yes.
I encourage people to just go look at one or two of his videos. You might get hooked and might end up watching several, but you'll get a chance to watch some of your heroes or some of the people you admire and his description of them crossing over. So it's very
Yeah.
fascinating.
Oh, that sounds great. Thank you.
Yeah. Laurie, anything else that you or your guides would like to add to this discussion?
Um, I think the guides have some last words here. We would like to encourage all of you that as a way to prepare, if in fact humans can truly prepare for this ending, would be to spend time in meditation and prayer, whatever you wish to call it, but really centering yourself, aligning with the soul, so that your human mind and ego are able to communicate with soul and have at least some understanding of this process. Soul will also be able to begin to make those connections to understand the leaving process. Know that you will not go alone, that family members, friends, angels, beings of light will be there to escort you, to support you, and to welcome you back into the soul world. It is quite joyous on this side. It has been said that a death on earth is a birth and rebirth in heaven.
No, that's fantastic.
Yeah. So that's what they have to say.
Okay, that's wonderful. And for those of us that do have fears about it, I'll put myself in that category. This helps understand and maybe release some of those fears and take away the anxiety that you think about when you think of crossing over.
Mm.
So, okay, anything else from you, Laurie?
No, I think that's it. Good topic.
Interesting topic, and I hope
Yeah.
it's helped someone. And we'd love to hear your comments about it. And if you have a story about how you'd like to go out on a high note or any experiences you have with seeing someone cross over, we'd love to hear about those in the comments, as well as topics for anything in the future. So if you've liked this, please smash that like button. And you can also share this with a friend if you think they would benefit from it. If you are not already, you can subscribe to our channel. And on the bell, you can hit all notifications so that you'll always be notified when we have a new release. If you'd like to get a hold of either Laurie or me, you can contact us at ourspiritualsojourn@gmail.com, and we will both get the email and one of us will answer, we promise. We'll get back to you on your questions, or we'll help you with whatever discussion might need to occur. So with that, we thank you all very much for joining us today on a kind of an interesting but unusual topic, and we hope that we've helped you. And we'll see you next time.
See you next time.